I hope you're ready for some terraforming. There's so much that we've got to do around what we built in the last one to really get it to just the right feel that we want to go for. So let's go pay our horse a visit and we'll ride on over there and I can show you what's going on. The last time we were here in this world, we put together this cozy little witch manor over in this area next to where we had found that first village. We're actually pretty close to where our house is set up right behind me over there, and it's just out of visible range once you're all the way over there. But I spent a lot of time talking in the last episode how I want to turn that area into a little bit of this marshy swampland kind of a feel, and it's not going to be too widespread. Like, I'm not going to turn all of this area into something like that, but rather everything just around the house itself, because everything that we do over here, it's all going to be a part of a much larger build, a much larger picture that is going to really be taken up in the sky above it. What we've built here and what we're going to continue building over here all kind of sits underneath that, and it's kind of accenting details to the bigger overall picture. So this little marshy area where everything is really overgrown and watery, all of that is pretty much going to remain just underneath our main centerpiece. And that centerpiece is going to be a huge tree that lingers overhead. And yes, even bigger than the tree that we built back next to the house. Quite a bit, actually. But that's not my focus for right now. That's going to be what we do to cap it all off in this little spot right here. What we really need to start doing is hammering out all of the details around the house that we put together in the last episode so that we can really make it fit in with the surrounding area. Because right now, while it looks just fine and it could work in this context, we've just got these hills over here, we've got this blank plain right here, not even any pieces of grass, and then we just got a normal forest behind it. And sure, this looks fine in that context, but I think once we start to build up the rest of the area around it, this will start to look infinitely better, and it will feel a little more intentional. It'll feel more like it's a part of what's going on around here rather than a bit of an outlier or something that stands out versus all of this normalcy. So the first step to doing that is getting a pathway up to this manor. Now, fortunately for us, I've got a lot of leftover mud and similar type of blocks from when we built the house in the last episode that I think we're ready to just jump into getting the path and some of the terrain built up. And the best part about all of it is that this also includes a collab that I did with another creator. Much like I had done the Witch Manor with Drift in the last episode, a lot of the leading up details and some of the scenery around here in the name of all of the terraforming was done with Megiibyte. And we went into that collab with the idea that we were going to create the build up to this house right here that I built with Drift. So it's kind of like a collab within a collab as a part of a collab or something. Either way, I'm excited to get it all in place because I think it turned out really cool, and Megiibyte is very, very good when it comes to nature-y things and terraforming. So we put together something that was really, really fun. But before we get to it, I've got to sleep, and I've got a couple of clips from that stream to show you guys. Just kidding, I kind of messed things up when I did that stream, so I don't really have any clips to show, but I do have the soundbite, which was pretty funny and completely unfortunate.
You give me like 5 seconds.
Oh, that's crazy. Ouch. Oof.
It's pretty tall, no?
Oof. 5'6".
Is that not tall? 6? How tall are you?
So legally, as per my license,
Legally,
I am 5'8".
5'8".
Yeah,
Wow,
legally as per
that's
my
surprising.
license. That's surprising. What does that mean? All right, time to get terraforming here. Let me take a look at our setup here and see what we've got left and what we can use to get us started. So building in a swampy, marshy sort of style is not something I've ever really attempted before in all of the builds that I've done. So a lot of this is pretty new to me, and I've been trying to figure it out as I go and try and think of all of the different things that might feel like they fit or just help complete the picture of this marshy, swampy, watery, muddy kind of area. So the first big thing that I came up with to try and help sell that was lowering the pathway down to about 1 block below the height of the water level. Essentially where the bulk of the foot traffic is, I just lowered that a little bit below the surface. And of course, when you mix in all of the mud and muddy mangrove roots in these pockets of water, it kind of gives this sense that wherever you're walking, you've kind of dug into the ground just a little bit. Like the ground's gonna give way because of how soft and muddy it is. And then of course you've got the little pockets of water here and there that are just kind of filling up really easily because of how much water is in the area at all times and how muddy everything is. So I did my best to kind of sell that with the pathway that meanders through here, and it meanders quite a bit. We've still got some more details to do, but there will be a reason that it meanders the way it does and why it doesn't take a more direct approach or a more straight shot through here. There's also a lot more that we've got to do around the body of water in front of the house to kind of muddy up the edges and help make the entire thing feel like it's in this muddy environment. But I wanted to bring some attention to the pathway especially, and how I tried to sell that marshy feel by lowering it just that little bit. Of course, deep slate and cobbled deep slate and the ever so occasional blackstone slab in there as well can kind of help sell that muddy palette, that muddy color scheme as well. At least when you surround it with mud and muddy mangrove roots, the other colors can kind of help sell that, but you definitely need the mud to make it feel like it's mud when you're using those deep slate blocks. And while there's still a lot of details to go throughout here to finish what we had built together, I want to point out the tree stump feature of this area that, for the most part, was done by Meggie when we were doing our collab build. The idea is that in that spot there was once a pretty big tree that sat there, and it has since been reclaimed by nature, at least the stump of it here, where you've got some of the roots that are shown off, and one of them arches up and over the pathway. And that just creates a fun little fantasy element as you're walking through the road up to the Witch Manor, where you get to cross under the roots of this once great tree that has now just kind of formed this little archway. And even further back as you're approaching the house and the water, it helps fill out this picture frame much like what we had built back with our house on the hill and the tree that loomed over it. We've got this sort of picture starting to form on the roadway as you approach the house. As I mentioned a second ago, there's still a lot more detail needed for this area, but this is one of those things that just adds that little bit of flavor to it by adding a whole lot of character and a whole lot of intrigue to the area. Now, I never would have come up with anything like that, but that's definitely in the realm of the type of things that Megiibyte likes to build. As a matter of fact, now's a great time to be able to show off some of the things that Meggie's done before. If there was one word to sum up all of these builds and the usual feel that you get from them, it's definitely whimsical, which definitely fits what we did in the previous episode with Drift for this area. Meggie's style is very much in the fantasy realm of things and usually involves quite a bit of nature-y elements, especially in the form of mushrooms. It feels like every build has a really fun story behind it, and that's a big reason that they all feel so full of life. These builds here that I'm showing are only a couple of some of the really cool things that she's done before. So I highly encourage you go check out what she's done, because there's a lot of really cool little building things that you can learn from seeing some of the things that she puts together. We've got all of the roadway laid out going up to the house right here, and I don't think I'm going to take the path any further than right about this spot, at least for the time being, while we focus our efforts on this area right here. I don't want to get too carried away in some of the smaller details like where this road might meander to long term. But at the start of it, we've got a blending from mud into the deep slates, which are also meant to represent mud, just different textures of it. And then as you kind of come down that little step right there, that's where we start to have this effect where you're a little bit lower than the water level. The ground is kind of sunk in a little bit where the foot traffic might be most common. And while we're lacking a lot of the details here, especially on the right side of the pathway, we've got some of it in with the tree stump like I mentioned. We've got our little archway, and we can kind of see that effect that I was talking about as you walk underneath it and you approach the house, which, as you turn the corner right here underneath the archway, presents itself perfectly right in frame right here. You get a nice view of this tree stump to the left of it, with all of the leaves and vines and nature-y overgrowth that's happening on top of it. And then from there, you're right up against the water right here, where we've got some of these mangrove roots that are kind of helping blend the mud with the water right here. You can create this really cool effect with the roots, where of course they're waterloggable, and you can use them to blend the water with the mud on the edge right here. And I think that worked out perfectly, especially with the fact that we have some mud under the water right here to kind of help sell it as well. But of course, the picture isn't really complete until we get this side over here done, and there's quite a few details that end up going here to fill up this space. I'm excited to get those in place, but before we do, I just wanted to give you a little bit of the feel as you walk down the road. Now we've got this little pocket of water right here separate from the main body of of water, and we did some blending with all of the mud and the roots and even some gray carpets as well. And again, it's just more of these little details that we can use to make it feel like it's a little bit more of a marsh. Back here, you get a little bit of a different view of the house as you approach the main entryway right here. We've got this little rickety staircase that's kind of falling apart just a little bit, blending the mud up to the porch right here. And now we've made our way up to the porch and where we left off on the last episode here with the Witch Manor. So I'm fairly happy with how the road has turned out, this little pathway right here, but I can't be too certain on the feel until we start to build up some of the rest of the area over here, starting with the cliff face and some of the accenting details in the grass over on this side, and then bringing it over to the other side, and even further along the body of water over there. We really need to fill in that landscape right there as well to really make this a complete picture. I think that's enough yapping for the feel that we're trying to go for in this area, and I think we're ready to get some of these big details in place so that we can really start to see all of this come together. What a beautiful sunrise. If only not for the solicitors in this area. Teach these guys a lesson about coming here. Oh, actually, this is a great reminder. I didn't know these guys would trade the eye blossoms, but that is a perfect segue for part of what I want to get done in this episode. We are officially in the new update, which means we've got a pale garden that we can go find and go grab some new blocks. Before we do that though, I want to walk you guys through this area now that we've got it fully built up, at least to the point in which Megiibyte and myself got in our collab session. So this is the lead up to the Witch Manor. We've got, of course, the pathway, and I covered all of that with all of the mud, and now we've got all of the accenting details. So of course we've got the big mushroom in the house over yonder, but we decided to continue that theme by adding some more over here. And we stuck with a red mushroom theme to feel more akin to mushrooms that you might expect. In big part, that's so that the blue coloration over there stands out that little bit more, all while keeping a kind of mushroomy shape to it. And of course, selling that this area is going to have a lot of big fantasy growths like this big mushroom right here as well, which all adds to make that feel like it makes a little bit more sense in this area. Now, there's a lot of tiny little details that we added throughout here, and one of the things I still need to do is grab some bone meal and add a couple glowing glowberries to some of these vines up here. I think having a little bit of light would definitely add that nice little touch. But as we walk throughout this area, you've already seen the tree stump and the root that kind of hangs up and over. And apparently I need to get some string for these vines right here. Ojang, please, I'm begging you, let us shear vines like we can shear glowberries, please. That's all I want in my life, please. So I'll have to fix that at some point. We got the sound of running water nearby, and I actually really like that sound. It's not necessarily intentional. It comes from over here. I've got a couple lily pads on the tree stump on the base of it. I figured that would be a pretty cool little detail that you can get. All you've got to do is take a top slab and you waterlog it, and then you can place a lily pad on top of it. You can't normally place lily pads on full blocks or even top slabs unless it's water, but I found this cool little trick. If you just waterlog a slab, you can put a lily pad on it, and so it adds this nice little effect to the overgrown, reclaimed by nature sort of tree stump that we're going for. Another thing you might notice around here is we've got some cattails sitting by the water. I added a couple more around the area back over here as well. And then I tried something similar over here with green candles, and this is mostly just meant to represent some kind of like abnormally tall grass or weed potentially that's just growing in this area in clumps. So we've got a little bit right here going on, and then we've got a couple more over there as well. I felt like it was a nice detail that kind of rhymed with the cattail theme that we have going on in some of these pockets of water, and it would fit really well considering we have all of the grass and moss and ferns and everything else around the area. We of course added some smaller mushrooms right here using a lot of the same coloration that we did on the big one, just on a larger scale. We're kind of combining these red colors with this sandstone and birchwood kind of palette, and I think it works out really nicely for trying to get some different mushrooms in the area. We do of course have some classic terraforming up here, just a little cliffside, nothing fancy whatsoever. We kind of mossed over a bunch of it and then added a little tiny bit of shading here and there, but for the most part it's a very simple little cliff. It's not meant to be the focus of this area, it's just meant to enhance the rest of the details, and I think it does that pretty nicely overall. This big mushroom looming over the path is of course one of the main pieces of it, and as you walk through this area and the Witch Manor comes into focus a little bit more, you pass underneath this big mushroom, you have the archway right here. There's all these fun little details that can kind of draw your attention before you turn this corner and the real centerpiece is unveiled. Now, of course, there's a lot of work to go in this area. I want to add some stuff on the backside over here, and then there's all of this empty space over here as well that we can definitely work with. I've got some plans for at least the area behind my head. This area over here, we're going to have to figure it out a little bit, and then of course, long term, I know what I want to do up above and up on this hill back there. Before we do all of that though, I mentioned that we're in the new update and there's some pale moss and delicious pale oak that is calling our name. So for the first time since maybe the first episode of this series, it's adventure time. Let's grab a boat. We found one, and I was not ready for it to be this massive. And not only is it this massive, but look how looming it is. It's just up on this plateau. That is such a cool view coming around here through the jungle, emptying out into this area, and then just seeing that right there. That is a super cool look. And also, this is one of the instances where you can hear it the most. We have been using ambient sounds for the entirety of this world, and it doesn't always make itself known. But here in the jungle, it is a little louder and you can really hear all of the little ambient nature sounds. And I love this mod so much. If you're not using ambient sounds, I cannot recommend it enough. But anyway, back to the task at hand. We've got a pale garden up ahead that we can go explore and get some good stuff from. And not only that, but right over there, there's actually a woodland mansion. And that's the very first one that I know of in this world. I don't know of any other locations where a mansion could be found. And we just kind of happened to find one right next to where the Pale Garden is. So that was a crazy coincidence and maybe could be worth doing a little exploring on an upcoming stream. This video will probably end up coming out after that stream happens. But if you don't know, every Friday, we stream from this world over on Twitch, and then I upload the VODs of those streams over on the Acrylic VODs channel. So if you ever want to catch a VOD of any of our streams, whether it's from this world or another world, I do upload those over there. Regardless, I think we'll save the mansion for a little bit later, and for now, let's go take a look at what we can find in the Pale Garden. All right, as we approach a little bit closer, I decided to take my wings off and not even have them on the hotbar. I want to kind of get the full experience, and I think it's perfect that the build-up into this biome right here is through this dark oak forest. You kind of get a little bit of that spooky vibe to begin with all of the dark spaces under the trees and all of the potential for mobs to spawn. And now we're in here, And I'd be really curious to know if ambient sounds does any fancy things for this biome as well. But here we are, and it looks like we got a couple of eye blossoms over here, and you can pick them up with just an empty fist, but look at this up here. I am using better fog controls, I think is the name of the mod, to be able to better determine where the fog starts and where the fog ends, and I think it creates this really cool look up here. We of course have some of these falling leaves as well, which I think is really cool. And look at this, as I come over here, the sky's a little more blue, but as we come into here, the entire sky changes to this very murky, this kind of ominous, dull gray color. Very interesting, definitely matches the biome, really, really cool effect. And as we come a little bit further in, it's like everything just goes grayscale, the sky included. I think that's such a cool touch. The aesthetics in this biome are really, really cool, and I think especially as nighttime falls, we'll really get an interesting experience throughout here. My only gripe with the addition of this biome is I really wish they made the trees a little more unique in terms of the shape. The pale oak we'll get to in a second, but these are just reskinned dark oak trees, and I really, really wish they went with a more unique design to make this place feel a little more special. I think it could have gone a really long way, but at the end of the day, I can't complain too much because all of this area, this is such a cool biome. We've got some new plants out of it, and I really like how they're different in the daytime versus the nighttime. I think that's really cool. And of course, we got a moss variant. That's not something I ever thought we'd get, is another moss variant, but here we are. More moss, more carpets, just a different shade. And these right here, I forget exactly what they're called, but I think I have some shears if I grab some out of here. We'll grab intern Steve here and take a look. These are called pale hanging moss. These are really, really cool. We don't have a regular moss version of this unless you might count glowberries to kind of fit that aesthetic. But this is going to be a really, really nice thing to have. Now, it looks like nighttime's approaching. I'm going to turn the brightness up just so it looks a little bit better on the video, because the 30 brightness is great in the daytime, but you can't see anything on the video at night. So let's turn the brightness up just a little bit. We know we've got mobs spawning, so this is where it gets a little more interesting. I'm going to try to avoid those zombies. We're just going to walk around for a little bit. Oh, and already we can see a creaking right there. He doesn't seem to have noticed us. And he's actually moving while we're looking at him, interestingly enough. I wonder at what point will it register that I'm looking at it and stop moving? Oh, there it is. It's right there. That's the point. So what would we call that? That's like 20 blocks or something? 15? I don't know. It's kind of weird because it's at a diagonal. But we've got one right there. I wonder just how crazy it could get if I'm walking around here and I'm not doing anything about that guy back there. He seems to have a pretty small aggro range for sure. But if I'm just kind of walking around, I wonder how crazy it could get in terms of the number of them that could start appearing. Like, is it possible that we end up being chased by like 10 of them at once? I know they don't linger too far away from their home tree, so that has got to be a part of it for sure. We've only seen the ones so far, and I'm also wondering at what range do they start spawning? So what I mean by that is if there's trees too far away from the player, will they still spawn, or will they only start appearing when I'm close enough to their home tree? We've got another one right there. I've only seen zombies in here so far outside of the creaking themselves. We do have a smite axe, which usually helps make these a one-shot, but yeah, it's a lot of zombies around here. I'm listening very closely to footsteps and everything like that, and what I might need to do is actually turn the game volume up. I'm gonna bump hostile creatures up to maybe 6%, I think. They're already very loud, even at that. Oh, ooh, I did not like that. I did not like that the second he had a chance. You can almost hear, I need to get rid of the zombie to be able to hear it better. But it's like you can hear twigs snapping, like even when they're not moving, unless it's another one nearby. But just kind of ambient, very occasional sounds of like sticks or twigs or the like. It's very, very interesting how these work. I think this is a fantastic addition to the game. I think this is really cool. It kind of fits that like pseudo horror, or I guess horror light element that they started introducing with the Deep Dark and the Warden and all of the stealth mechanics. very interesting that they continue to go down that route with this update here. I do think it's really cool, and I think it could add some really interesting mechanics for map design, for example, or game design within Minecraft, all of that kind of stuff. Very, very cool, and definitely cool to get to see these guys in action just a little bit. So if I'm not mistaken, I'm going to turn around here and let them get a hit or two. They don't really deal a ton of damage. They definitely flail out like crazy when they hit you. I do have protection for armor all the way around, and the only thing that is a netherite is the chest plate. It's all invisible because of the texture pack so that you could see my skin better, but it looks like if you're fully geared up, they're not really going to do much of anything other than the little spook factor that they have when they appear and startle you around a corner. At least when you're in the end game, they don't really do too much, but of course, as many of you already know, they are indestructible. So, as a matter of fact, we're right here next to this tree, but they cannot be killed at all, no matter what you do to them or how much damage you do or anything like that. They will always survive until daytime comes around, where he'll disappear until the next night approaches. So, I'm hitting him a bunch of times because I want to try and get a little bit of resin while we're here. A little bit of everything that we can get. So if we just keep doing damage to him, we'll eventually start getting a lot more resin up on the tree. Because it kind of is, I'm pretty sure, based on how much damage they take, or maybe just how frequently they're taking damage, or something to that effect. Now some creepers around here. It's definitely sketchy at nighttime, but if we can get ourselves up into this tree, we can find the heart and make this guy disappear without having to wait until daytime. It'd be a little sketchy, though. I just got to keep him in eyesight right there. And it looks like we've got a little bit of resin. We got a resin clump, so we can start doing some cool things with that as well. But it looks like right there is the creaking heart. So we get rid of that, and we can actually pick it up as well. But he's got a cool little animation. He disappears. And you can craft these as well as gather these. So this could be really interesting as well. You'll be able to take these around with you. You're not limited to where they can spawn, kind of like you are with the Warden. You have to have a naturally generated Shrieker. But with this guy, you can fully control where you bring him and where he spawns, which I think is really, really cool. All right, I've gone ahead and slept, and to get to the main draw of this place, it is, of course, if you have not already guessed, the pale oak wood. These trees right here, this is something I have been waiting for such a long time in Minecraft, is a wood type that is lighter than birch and less saturated than birch as well. Something a little less yellow and a little more white to be able to work with in the wood family, especially because it gives us all of those wooden options. Trapdoors, fences, buttons, everything that you get with wood, which is typically a lot more variance than any other block gets, even the stone types for that. And I'm super excited to get to play around with the pale oak wood, the pale oak logs, all of that kind of stuff, because I have been waiting for this color to exist as a wood type for so long in this game. So that is by far my favorite part of this update, without a doubt. And of course, while we're here, I'll definitely make sure to stock up on some of the eye blossoms. We've got some open and some closed, and I'm actually curious to test this out right here. If I gathered one while it was open, and then I placed it in the day, does it close? Or does it stay open? It looks like it stays open. So that is really interesting to know. If you specifically want one or the other, all you have to do is pick it up in that state, and it looks like it will retain that state no matter what you do. So I could probably have closed ones at nighttime as long as I pick them up when they're closed. That's really cool as well. And I definitely want to make sure to gather a bunch of this stuff right here, because this is going to be so cool to use. This is such a cool vine or moss or whatever. What was it called? Hanging moss. It's so cool. This is going to be so nice for some decoration and some detail in various builds as we go. And I almost forgot, the carpets here have a really fun little attribute right here. And this is completely at random as well. Unlike the normal moss carpets, these ones kind of grow up the side of whatever you place them next to. And it's kind of at random. So usually like varied textures will just kind of be based on the coordinate. But with these ones, it's just place it, break it, place it, and you'll end up with either one tall or two tall. And this does work on different blocks. So it doesn't have to be the edge of a tree. It can be a dirt block. It can be whatever block you want it to be there. As long as it's a full block, I don't think you could do it with slabs or any transparent blocks, but that's going to be a really cool detail. Very subtle, but something that you can definitely do some cool stuff with if you find some good uses. I'm going to stick around here for just a little bit and gather a bunch of this stuff to bring back home. And once we get back there, we've got a couple more things to build around the Witch Manor. So back over here next to the manor and where we added all of these details, there's a distinct lack of any of these details beyond this kind of edge right here, where we've got this big wide open hill that just kind of hugs the water, and of course the river that passes through as well. Now, long term, I've got a lot of plans for what I want to do in this area with some of the cooler details, some of the bigger details, something to kind of fit a little more of what we did behind me there. But I don't think I'm ready to get any of those larger details in place until we have a good baseline to work with. So what I'm thinking we need to do around this area is I need to take this muddy, marshy kind of environment and I need to expand it around this edge of the water. We can just call it the pond for now. But take that mud and expand it over here, kind of get some more of these details up on this hillside, and maybe even start doing a little bit over here as well. I effectively want to take everything around the house, and we want to muddy up the edges of the river to make the entire thing feel like it all sort of flows with this atmosphere right here, and it's not just this spot specifically. So, of course, we'll take a lot of the mud and muddy mangrove roots and normal mangrove roots, and we'll kind of have this effect going on around the edges of the river, but I'm also going to expand a lot of the grass and ferns and some of this foliage as well. And we'll even take a lot of the details with the glass and the candles. We'll try to get some more cattails around the area. We'll do some of these large strands of grass or weeds or whatever they are as well. And that'll all kind of help build up the area to fit in a little more with the hyper detailed spot that we did right here. Now, in terms of mushrooms and things like that, I think that is part of the bigger details that I think we're going to add in the next episode. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself on this one alone, but I'm really excited to get those in place. Like I said, though, I think this area could do with a lot of the lesser details, a lot of the smaller things, to really set the stage for some of the bigger and better things that we want to add. So I'm going to figure out how much mud and everything else we have left and get cracking on dressing this place up just a little bit more. A couple stacks of bone meal later, I think we've got something that works pretty well. It also took a whole lot of green dye, so pretty much all of the cactus I had sitting around for all the glass and some of the candles as well. Never quite realized just how expensive it was to dye candles, but that's a thing apparently. Anyway, we've gotten to a point that I'm pretty happy with. Considering we're still going to need a lot of detail still to be added, we've got some really big things that are going to happen, and we're just kind of setting ourselves up for that. So the main thing I did was I took the mud around the edges of the water and I continued it all around this plot, I guess we can call it. So you can see a lot of it over there that's been expanded down towards the edge of the river, and right around that spot is about where it tapers out, and then over on the other side you can see where it begins, and that mud kind of follows that little hillside along the riverbank on the opposite side of the house, and eventually makes its way right over to about there. And of course, where the house is itself, I added a bunch of mud underneath so that it wasn't all grass and felt like it was also a part of the muddy area. And it all circles around to right about here. I, of course, took the mangrove roots and I added those into the water to help the blending process. I got some lily pads as well. I thought that would be a nice touch every so often. And beyond that, it was just a lot of the usual mud and muddy mangrove roots kind of mixture along these edges to get this sort of look to the place. I would waterlog a mangrove root every so often in the ground as well, just to help sell that marshy feel again. And of course, I added some of these cattails and then some of the similar details, these long grassy weeds or whatever with the green candles. I added a couple pockets of those around just to add that extra little touch. One thing that I did struggle with a little bit outside of those details right there was detailing the muddy area itself. When it comes to grassy areas like up here, we've got ferns and we've got grass and tall ferns and bushes and all of these kinds of things that can help make this place feel lively and detailed, but I couldn't think of too many different things for the muddy pockets or muddy areas. We just have some gray carpets to add that little bit of variation. We of course have the mangrove roots, and then, of course, these glass and candle details that are in pockets every so often, but of course, you don't want to overdo. So it does leave the muddy areas feeling a little bit bland, a little plain. Maybe it's just me, maybe I'm overthinking it, and maybe we just need to get the rest of the place built up. Because after all, this isn't meant to be where you're focusing. This is just supposed to be an accenting detail to the area. Like, eventually, we're going to have a lot of other things that are drawing your eye around the area here, so maybe it's not a big problem, and I just need to see it all the way through to get the proper feel. If we stand up here on the tree stump, however, you can kind of get a good view of the area and all of the details that we've been putting in place today, all of the little things that we've added to the area to really start to bring it to life. And I'm really happy with where we've gotten so far. Now, one of the big things that I want to add in this area is some more of these mushrooms like what's behind my head. I've come up with a couple different designs that I think will be a lot of fun to add in the surrounding area so that we can get a couple more of those, and it's not just the one on the house and this pocket right here. We're going to kind of sprinkle them all around the area right here to help fill in all of the details down below. And I say down below because, of course, I hinted at it earlier, but the main piece of this build is going to sit above, and it's going to come off of that slope right there, that plateau back there. And I'm super excited to get to that part, but I wanted to save that for last, so I'm just trying to make sure we get all of the details around here done first, so that when we cap it all off, it's with the biggest and best piece of this area. It is also worth mentioning that by the time this episode goes up, we're going to be pretty much in the midst of the holiday season, so there might be a little bit of a gap between this episode and the next one, just given all the events and family time and a little bit of time off. That's all going to be had in the next couple of days as we get through the holidays and the new year, of course. There won't be a big hiatus of videos by any means. I just might have a couple days where I can't work on it like I usually would. So if the next episode ends up being 10 days or more away from this one, you'll know why, but I'm pretty sure that's the case for most people releasing videos around this time of year. If I had to guess, I don't know, I'm new to the whole thing, but that'll be the case. And with that in mind, I definitely wanted to make sure that I could get this episode out for you guys to have as the holiday season ramps up, give you something to watch, and carry over until the next one is ready. So let me know what you think of all of the details that we added around this area, some of the muddy things, the tree stump, the mushrooms, all of that kind of stuff, and let me know if you have any other ideas for some other cool ideas you would like to see throughout this little area. Also, don't forget to go check out some of Megiibyte's content. She does some really cool things, and I couldn't have gotten this area to look as good as it does without her help. As always, special shout out to everyone who supports the content over on Patreon. It's thanks to you guys that I can do this, and don't forget, if you want to join, you'll get your own custom tree back by the house over yonder. That's going to be it for today, so as always, I hope you guys left feeling just a little bit inspired.